All right, everybody. Welcome to the Agentic SaaS Executive Summit. We're live from the SiriusXM studios here at the Wynn in Las Vegas. And I want to say a special thank you real quick to Myers Media for hosting us here and for coordinating everything for us. And of course, to Omnistrate for sponsoring this as well. So the first panel we're going to do, and we're going to do two panels today, is going to be Agentic AI, revolutionary, evolutionary, or hype. Now, I've got an opinion on this. I work for AWS. If you haven't seen me before, my name is Bill Tarr. We have a panel of experts here who all represent different aspects of the agentic world and have different perspectives on how their companies have changed, what they're doing. And I think as we think about this topic and we want to set the context, what I'd like people to think about is we've been talking about agentic AI for probably a solid year now. We've had a lot of good conversations. There's been a lot of cool technology that comes out. But where are we? Are we actually getting to the point where in 2025, we're building production applications and delivering them to customers? And I think that's really where the rubber hits the road when we talk about any technology. So we're lucky enough to have a great panel with us today. We're going to go around the room and let them introduce themselves. And hopefully you'll be really compelled. This is a great group of people. We're going to have some great questions. Let me pass it around the room. Why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here?
Thank you, Bill. Very glad to be here. I'm Shriram. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Rox. Rox builds revenue agents for the Global 2000. Our fundamental hypothesis is the existing revenue stack is completely broken. There are legacy CRMs and bolt-on products in the stack. Our hypothesis is that the data is moving away from the CRMs into the warehouses so that people can have a consolidated view of all the data in the system, not just a CRM, but also support product usage, marketing, and all the structured data, and also the unstructured data that is their emails, calendars, transcripts, and so on and so forth. What we do is we have our data accumulated both in the data warehouse and in S3. That's our data layer. And then what we build is we build revenue agents on top of that, which can run the entire workflow, from research to outreach to deal management, all the way to driving renewals and expansions. That is what we believe is going to be the next fundamental stack. And we believe, like coding agents, 10x engineering productivity, revenue agents will 10x productivity of customer-facing teams. That's about us.
Awesome. Guy, go ahead.
Nice. I'm Guy, the CEO and co-founder of FalkorDB. FalkorDB is a super fast graph database. It meant to behold knowledge. It meant to retrieve knowledge, agentic memory. We'll talk about it probably later. But in general, my background for the last 20 years is dealing with super fast databases. I've been dealing with in-memory databases like gigaspaces, and I was the CTO of innovation in Redis, and I've also done my PhD in transactional memory. But in general, how do you retrieve knowledge super fast? I'm not talking about analytics. I'm talking about when you need to retrieve knowledge in an accurate way, in low latency manner. So that's what FalkorDB is focused on, bringing the right tool to retrieve knowledge. Like you're doing retrieval augmented generation, you're doing RAG, but you want it accurate. You want to have an accurate agent application, so you need the right tool for it. So this is what FalkorDB is focused on.
Right on. Mihir.
Awesome. My name is Mihir. I'm the Director of Engineering at Scale AI. I've been there for close to 2 years. In the first year, I spent a lot of time working with Frontier Labs, providing them with label data for post-training. Post-training in layman's term is basically how these frontier models get their personality. They get alignment with human-centric workflows, and that's the last mile before these models go to production. And so in that much time, I spent a lot of energy trying to understand what is the right sort of data sets that needs to go into the model to align these models to various dimensions of performance. So I spent my first year at Scale doing that. I always assumed that, as these models got better, they would spread like wildfire across organizations, all types of organizations. When that did not happen, I grew curious and I wanted to learn more about why that's not happening. So I sort of shifted over to our enterprise side of the business, where we work more with organizations who are trying to bring AI to production. And the interesting thing, the insight that I have so far is that the methodologies that are applied in training these models they work well for general use cases, but enterprises by definition are snowflakes. And so how do you bridge that gap? I spent a lot of my time thinking about that. Before Scale, I used to work at Palantir. I was a forward deployed engineer there, working with enterprises there as well. So yeah, my current job feels like the marriage of my last two jobs. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. And Alok, close us out here.
Of course. Thanks, Bill, and thanks, team. So I'm Alok. I'm one of the co-founders here at Omnistrate. My primary focus has been so far is helping customers distribute their services, irrespective of whether it's in your account, in your customer's account. So essentially, there's a channel, what we call as distribution channels, right? And so these tend to get complex over time. So one of the things that we've seen is almost as a repeat pattern, both at AWS back when I used to work there, and at Confluent and startups like Confluent. I guess no longer a startup, but still, it took a while for them to get to that growth stage, right? And so what we've seen as a repeat pattern has been that there is this 30 to 40% of building a managed service which goes into undifferentiated work. And so that could include things like cloud infrastructure, things like marketplace integrations, observability integrations, there's a third-party things that go around it, right? And so all of that flows into things like how do your sales ops work? How does the FinOps work? How does the entire thing essentially, when you're building and, think of essentially promising an SLA to your customers, how does that come about? And so we focus on helping ISVs like FalkorDB or Rocks or even Scale to some degree, right? For ISVs like that, help distribute their services to their customers. And so we've made this essentially first-class citizen, if you will, think of it that way, as a problem, because it tends to be more of like a bolt-on in most cases because, obviously ISVs are focused on building their core product. And so that's essentially what Omnistrate is in a nutshell, and that's what we help people do.
All right. So I didn't lie, people. We have an amazing technical panel here. This is going to be a lot of fun. And so I want to start right away on the Agentic AI tech front. So the first question I'm going to ask is a little bit of a level set. And remember, we're sort of talking about this idea. Is this evolutionary, revolutionary? Is this hype? Is this a real thing that we're talking about? And all of you are technologists involved in the Agentic AI world. So let me take you back a little bit. All of you worked for other companies. You weren't always doing Agentic AI. Probably weren't doing it before last year because not many of us were. So what has happened in terms of Agentic AI, in terms of changing the way your platform or services are actually built? And I mean, hands-on, like I'm actually talking about how you build and how you deliver your software, right? So Mihir, let me kick it over to you first. Just take a shot at this. Tell me how your life has changed in this world of building applications that we're in now.
Absolutely. So I guess if I speak personally, I used to spend a lot of time finding the right boilerplate code, the right dev tools that would do the things that I would not want to do so that I can focus on the things that I do want to build.
Right.
Personally speaking, I tend to get distracted very easily. I have a low attention span. So I really like to take as much of my time as I can to just stay focused on the one thing that I set out to build. I would always try to find the right best practices and the right tools that help me move faster. I feel like that entire burden of finding that right tool chain has been abstracted away with what we've seen so far, where I view like this new technology as basically a probabilistic model that lets you condense a lot of information and give it and query it. And that's been great because I can ask it specific questions and then it gives me specific answers. I can test them immediately and I can go back to what I wanted to do. So I think that's been the biggest change for me.
Sweet. Yeah. And I'm hearing a little bit of evolutionary in there. You're still doing some of the same tasks, but the way you're doing them is actually changed.
Yeah.
All right. Now, let me kick it over to Guy. In terms of how you guys, as a database, there's a lot of traditional software practices in there, but how is this changing the way that you build and deliver your software?
So I don't think it really fundamentally changed the way we are delivering a database. A database is still a reliable infrastructure that needs to be reliable and consistent. This is what we are bringing to the picture. This is what we're bringing to agentic application. But I can tell you that the way people are using it is changing, right? The way they ingest data, the way they retrieve knowledge is changing. They're trying to avoid direct interaction with the database. They want someone else to do it or some agent to do it for them. So you see more and more coming natural language to database or unstructured data, automatic ingestion. You see less of them defining a predefined ETL process. They want someone else to define it or the agents to define it for them without them really need to define step by step how the ETL is going to work. So the way they consume the software is different. The way we deploy the software, the way we maintain it is pretty similar. It doesn't really it didn't change from the time you used to just deliver a database for a software as a service, a constant software as a service. But I can tell you that the way we develop it, or the way we deploy it, or the way we, as a company, build our company, changed completely. You can see, for example, our CMO, right? Our CMO is one guy doing job that 10 people used to do in the past, right?
Nice.
He's deploying agents all over. He's consuming data. He never wrote a single line of code in his past, right? And now he's deploying applications. He's writing applications. The way he's building his department is different, right? Or the way developers, right, are developing the code is different. Like the way you are building the company changed.
All right. This is too good of a transition. I'm going to just diverge a little off the topic because I think you're almost talking about Rocks. So Rocks, when I've talked to you before, you call yourself an operating system for the cloud. And so I think you might even call yourself born in the cloud agentic system. So it isn't how it's changed, but your whole role and what your company does has evolved, right, over the last couple of years. So talk a little bit about that. And even though maybe it isn't a change, talk about how it's created a change for your customers and the people who consume your products.
Yeah, I mean, so I sort of agree with Guy here. So there are two things I'll talk about because the topic is it devolution or revolution? When building the software, it's definitely an evolution for us on how we go about building it. We don't need as many engineers as we need before to build software right now. I think that's sort of very clear. We need engineers who can orchestrate agents to actually do the job that they're trying to do. It could be Cursor, Cognition, whatever they have there, pick their tool, Cloud Code, to orchestrate it. The burden has moved from generating code to actually reviewing it and making sure that the code is right, is secure, to actually get it in. But I think that's the next spectrum that the agents are pushing into with bug bots and stuff like that from Cursor. So that is one on the engineering side. On the product side, for sure, like now, as Guy said, there's tools like Lovable, which you can use to actually generate designs. Right. Like the people who are designers can actually generate and look how the wireframes look like or how the product should look like, which makes it easy for the downstream people to consume. And they can have a full visualization of how to build it. So from an engineering perspective, product and both engineering, I think there is, the coding is probably just 2-3 years ahead of the other fields, but it's much evolved than how you do it before. Of course, there are problems coming downstream, like security and all this stuff, which we have to take care of. From the product perspective, what we are building to our customers, I would argue that it's a complete revolution on how we actually work. If you look at the history of how CRMs have evolved, there were I would say 3 different phases, and we are in the 4th phase now. The first one is completely on-prem, probably way before we tried anything. It's called Siebel. It's a monolithic on-prem CRM, very rigid. And then cloud happened, and then AWS came in. Salesforce became like the big CRM out there. So Salesforce and HubSpot where the data was. But the system of action became all the point tools out there. Like there's a whole suite of point tools on top of which everybody operated. And then you had data moving away from CRMs into the warehouses, which is what I talked about before. So the best revenue teams started breaking out the CRM because they couldn't just do anything on the CRM. They had to do work on it. It was not doing anything for them. So they had to move the data away into the warehouses. And then, but they're still building dashboards on top, and not the workflows are still manual. But right now, this is where the revolutionary part kicks in, where they want the CRM to do work for them. Right. So all the revenue teams want work to be done for them, or if you extend it, they want deals to be handed over to them on a platter.
Yeah.
So that's where I think it's revolutionary from the product that we are building, where it's effectively tokens in and tokens out.
Love it. Love it. Oh, look, I don't want to wait too long to get you into this conversation. Now, I'm going to be able to do a little self-promotion here. We're at reInvent, and tomorrow my friend Anthony McClure and I are actually doing a session called How Can Agentic SaaS Be Evolved Around the Control Plane? Right? So the control plane concept, when we talk about it in SaaS, is really how you operate your software. It's the software you as a company use to operate the software you're offering to your tenants. So I feel like there's a strong story here. I feel like if I ask you, like, how is the agentic story going to change a control plane, even though maybe not everyone would call it a control plane, but how would you operate your software? How would you govern your software? What are the stories that you're seeing that seem really compelling right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say actually there's 3 levels to this. So one is abstractions have changed in terms of how you interact with infrastructure. Previously, it's all about compute, storage, networking. Now, as Shriram was saying, it's all about tokens and how do you actually scale in and out, right? The second aspect is governance. So when we talk about governance, we're talking about especially data privacy, data security, data residency. So deployments now are essentially changing from data going to compute going to data, right? So which means customers and enterprises, especially in enterprise deployments, they're a lot more stringent about even trying to do POCs. And we've seen this with multiple ISVs, that it has to be within their VPC or within their data centers. So that's the second aspect of it. The third aspect is observability, anything that has to do with red teaming, for example. Like, how do you actually approach red teaming for this entire problem, right? So it's no longer about, because agents, as they live and breathe, they could do things. You need auditability. You need ways in which you can, clamp down that thing, right? And so that's where even the control plane can come in, essentially bring the human in the loop if necessary, or if, let's say, for example, there's an evolution right there again, which is have the right folks involved. In general, I would say the control plane is managing and battling all of these 3 things, and that's an evolution of what is happening today, right? And so from a revolutionary perspective, though, there are certain aspects to the control plane also that's essentially going down into the agents, where even the control plane is evolving into how people interact with the control plane. So we've had things like, for example, sales ops or FinOps. So the personas there tend to be more who describe the problem in a natural language. And so they want a state of the art of, like, let's say, for example, of state of what's happening today in the fleet, right? And let's say, for example, from a revenue perspective, the FinOps person is more interested in what's the TCO that's currently for the infrastructure versus how they're pricing the actual software, right? And so getting all of these details is becoming more and more accessible, because agents and LLMs at the end of the day understand the query better, and then, as we were talking about, know how to go query the data sources as necessary. And that is having an impact on the control plane too.
I like it. And I think I'm hearing a vote for evolutionary there too. Am I wrong?
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. I just to throw in my own 2 cents here, I feel like one of the things you said, human in the loop, feels like the most compelling piece of the story with the agentic world right now. I think having agents do complete tasks, it's possible. But if you're doing any things, one of the things you said, Guy, and with a lot of software, we can't just throw it to agentic solutions and hope that it comes up with the answer we want it to come up with. We still need human in the loop for a lot of the solutions we're building. And to me, that sort of indicates for evolutionary. I'm going to throw hype out. I don't think that, I think we can all dismiss hype, especially with the people we have in the room here. But I think for at least all of you guys, it's actually had an impact on the businesses and the way we're building, right? So I like hearing that. I think that's a way to answer our question in like the first 20 minutes. Now we can move on to even some more topics. I do want to pivot this just a little bit though. So we've been talking a little bit around SaaS tech, right? So this is like the technology that we're delivering. How do the agents come in, and how are they changing the way we deliver multi-tenant products or databases, whatever we're deciding to build? Now let's sort of pivot to something you started going down this route on. How are customers really changing what they are consuming from the apps? And are you hearing from your customers that they have some different preferences? And maybe I'll focus in even more specifically about pricing. Because I think pricing is one of the things in SaaS we're seeing be evolutionary. And even like outcome-based pricing, for example. I don't even know if that existed before we got to the agentic world. So let me kick this to a couple of you guys. Are you hearing your customers coming to you and asking for different types of pricing, even since you've introduced the products? So Sri, let me kick it to you first, because you guys have been out here already in an agentic world. Are people coming to you and saying, we'd prefer to pay this way versus this way?
Absolutely. There are 3 different pricing models that we've seen. To break it down, what people are stuck at in the world, in the land we are in, is still seat-based pricing.
Right.
They're trying to understand how much does it cost per rep
to
use the product. We kind of have to educate them. Hey, you don't have to pay. So we sell agent per account. They're like, hey, how many agents? Like, do you have to charge per agent? Like, gotta kind of tell them that no, it's unlimited agents, it's unlimited seats. So they are still stuck in the world of how much do I pay per seat. So they're forcing us to like make the calculation and tell them how do we pay per seat, because revenue, I mean, has been decades old, right? It's like the oldest out there.
Right.
The second that what we charge in the company is we have a mix of usage-based pricing and outcome-based pricing, I would say. What we have agent actions that we charge for, but then we also have metrics that are outcomes that we are measured against. If we don't hit the metrics, we are effectively not a good. We say it's not a good fit. We're not a pilot. We didn't succeed in the pilot.
Okay.
Very simply put. But then once we succeed in the pilot and once there's adoption, then we actually have agent actions, which loosely translates into outcomes, but for us loosely translates into tokens, by the way.
Got it.
Yeah. The other one is the complete outcome-based metrics that you talked about. There are other customers who, if it actually translates, for example, services, right? Service tickets, the companies out there like which actually do, like Sierra, for example, or Decagon. What they do is you have to, if the agent does not answer the question that the end user is asking, then they don't get charged. So they actually get charged per outcome that they have. So the three different models. Of course, you have the model providers who actually are charged for the tokens in and tokens out. That's standard SaaS pricing, but those are the three I've seen. In our case, it's mostly usage-based.
I like it. Mihir, let me kick this over to you too. So I think you have a very different purchaser in terms of who's buying your software,
Right.
Maybe a different role who you're approaching. Does that change the way that we think about pricing in the agentic world in terms of the role we're actually selling to?
Yeah, so I mean, we have a combination of software and services that we're providing, and at least in our context, given how early agentic SaaS is or agentic software is in general, the thing that our customers look to us for is, how do you evaluate a good KPI? What does success mean? What does good look like? And that has to be the foundation of any pricing strategy. And that's why we're also seeing a rise in these outcomes-based pricing, because anything else, it becomes very difficult to actually know if you're on the right track. Are more agents better? Are less agents better? Are more invocations of the agents better? We don't know yet. We don't even know what the actual outcome. We only know the outcome that our customers care about, and we don't even know the exact path that will bring us there. So we end up, having a very like case by case sort of a pricing strategy where it's focused on the outcome, and our goal is to sort of think about graduating the use cases in terms of complexity. So starting with a simple agent that can do basic retrieval all the way to a multi-agent system that is in an expert workflow that now needs human labeling, which also we can provide. So we think more about this like graduating the use cases from start to end, and that helps us at least ground our discussion on like what the outcome is for the customer.
Nice. Guy, let me change the question just a little bit. And, feel free to chime in on that too if you like. But I'm thinking a little bit when I'm thinking about a database, about the packaging, right? About how we package the software. Has any of the agentic stuff that your customers are consuming caused you to introduce like different pricing tiers or different models for those different types of customers you're starting to attract to your platform?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Like what we see lately, that so many startups, so many AI startups coming in, right?
Yeah.
And they're all having great ideas and they want to test them. So we kind of started to introduce these startup tiers, right? Which is going super fast. We see
Great.
every other guy coming out for Stanford or whatever, or going around in the valley having his own startup, right?
Yeah.
Having a hair startup, right? So yeah, so we're seeing many small deployments, things that we didn't see before. Like I'm talking about hundreds of megabytes. Just let me start. Let me run with it. Let me go with it. On the other end, what we're starting to see, a demand for bring your own account. Instead of using us as a SaaS, they want the data to run in their account. They want it to be deployed in their account, but they still need to be managed, right? They don't want to manage it on their own. So you need to have this compromise. How do you manage the database, but it's not running in our account. So you need to have it both. So we are using external infrastructure like Omnistrate to do it, right? But that creates a new thing, like that. They want to see the data staying close to the application. The data is becoming the most critical part for the application. If you want to have an accurate application, you need the data. So you're going back to this old data engineering. How do you make it accurate? How do you organize it? How do you retrieve it? But still you want it secure, so you want it in your account. So things are changing, evolving lately. So from these long tail users that are just starting their own startup and want to pay like, I don't know, tens of dollars a month or something like that, to those large customers who want to have it also, because they need to have agentic solution. They need to have it now. They've been pushed by their management. They need to have agentic, but they cannot take the data out. But they need all this new way of deploying data, of retrieving data. So they're coming with this demand of bringing your own account. So it kind of changed the way they consume the database.
Nice. Oh, look, I mean, I feel like that's a great transition over to Omnistrate. Like, so we're talking about customers now saying, hey, we would like our data or our deployments to be closer to us. And in an agentic world, this becomes very relevant. I mean, everyone talks about the agents themselves. It's the data behind the agents that really adds the value to an agentic world. Are you guys being asked by your customers to package the control plane up in different ways?
Yeah, 100%. So we've actually, to Guy's point, so we've actually had customers who've come in trying to essentially tackle different sets of users, right? So it's a very typical pattern. So you start off with a free tier or a pro tier that essentially is a quick way to get things up and running. You pay some amount just to try things out. But where agents are involved, as even Shriram was saying, it gets better only with data, right? So which means enterprises there are a lot of deals, and essentially the GTM is blocked essentially if you think of it from the ISV's perspective. And so we're seeing more and more of the BYOC, what we call as a BYOC, which is bring your own cloud or on-prem deployment use cases, come back in some ways, because on-prem was always this thing which was essentially the cloud took over, but then it's going back again to on-prem to some degree. And that's also interesting because in the agentic world, especially if you have custom models, customers tend to run their own inference servers, or customers prefer to run their own inference stacks. And the neo clouds are also taking over. So in the neo clouds where GPU availability is, let's say for example, for a much lower price, much better infrastructure. So that's also an interesting angle to that, right? But where we are fundamentally seeing the shift is primarily around data privacy and data protection, which is end customers see this as a new shiny toy. They want to try it, but then they don't want to do it without actually having a bunch of guarantees, and especially from a compliance perspective. And the other thing I would touch upon the pricing aspect, and very similar to what Shriram was saying, is the outcome-based pricing is actually a theme for, I would say, startups. We are seeing that more and more because that's where every penny counts, right?
Right.
And so that's also a theme because they tend to, from an infrastructure perspective, they prefer serverless. They tend to prefer something that's, if it's not in use, they don't want to pay, right? And so that's where the outcome-based pricing comes in. And enterprises definitely don't want unexpected uses, right?
Yeah.
So that's where enterprises still prefer the old model, and I completely agree with Shriram, which is they prefer fixed costs. They just need yearly contracts. They're done. No caps. That's it.
Yeah, perfect. Let me ask this to the room. Now, I know you guys are your founders, you're busy, you've got lots of stuff going on, but we are at reInvent. And so there was pre-invent last week, and so lots of announcements were flowing out. There's been a few announcements already at reInvent. Has anything blown your doors off so far? Has there been anything that sort of opened up your eyes, especially maybe from an agentic front, but okay. I mean, if it's anything else too that sort of facilitates your business, anything else you've heard so far this week or last that sort of caught your ear?
Yeah, I think definitely one. I was just reading about it, but basically AWS coming up with a roadmap for the Trainium chips, essentially getting much lower into the stack. I think that's definitely opening up another dimension to the whole, how the whole agentic development lifecycle happens on top of AWS. And I think that because we've seen that with Graviton, once they got Graviton in, it was much cheaper to run services. And so I feel like that seems like a little bit revolutionary from that perspective. And so one of the things that did catch my attention was they promised compatibility with the NVIDIA stack. So that's a big unlock because now you're not asking people to change the entire thing on top of it. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
That's pretty exciting, and it definitely affects the agentic world, right? Because the GPU costs have always been like the sort of the long pole in this tent of how do we keep costs down when we're being charged this much to run all of the inference and compute. How about anyone else? Anyone got anything else that sort of jumped out at them so far?
I think there's one more, which is, like as Alok was saying, when you go into like the big enterprises, they care a lot about where the data is actually flowing. So if AWS just came up with something where you can do the entire workflow, which is the logging, tracing, eval, and they have their own models now, I think the NOAA models, where everything can be run under AWS, not just Bedrock, right? So they're actually training new models that are hopefully getting to the state of the art. This is very helpful when you go into the enterprises because enterprises don't like a lot of sub-process. They don't like if you have like 5, 6 different subprocessors. They're going to ask, hey, what's happening with the data? Do you have PII? If you have one subprocessor, just AWS, where you do everything, then it makes it much easier for them, and you can run it in VPC, and all the privacy and governance stuff goes away. So I'm super excited to try it out.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. And again, yeah, very relevant to the topic at hand, right? Like the compute, the governance. How do you sell to enterprises? How do you get them to trust agentic workflows when inherently they really don't want to? They're being told they need to. Anyone else?
Yeah. I think that like this announcement about the new agents, all these security agents, like it seems like AWS is taking one step further, and they're starting to provide services and agents, built-in agents into the platform. That is becoming very interesting because they're eating from different solutions, right? As always, right? There was always like this red wedding, right? Here, which new vertical does Amazon getting into, right?
Right.
So it seems like Amazon is taking one step further here, or AWS is taking one step further into this agentic solution, like full solution. They were talking about security agents, right? They were talking about FinOps, I think, agents.
Yeah.
Let's see where it's going. I think it's going to be super interesting.
I'm excited by that too.
Mine is pretty similar to that one.
Yeah.
No, there's one that snuck by, which was, I think, like the Nova agent builder, which was super interesting because I think agents have this like cold start problem. You have to build them from scratch and then go through all the processes to actually make them usable. And I think now like for me, historically, AWS has always been the place where I come to, get the best tools and build the best things quickly. And this is like going in that paradigm where now the Nova builder lets you take the Nova model, build agents around it. And then I'm sure there's going to be an integration with a marketplace where you can then consume the best agents and then customize them. So get rid of the entire cold start problem. That's something that kind of snuck by.
I heard it's not just post-training, it's actually pre-training as well.
Oh, cool.
In AWS,
Yeah,
which is
that's what I
actually
heard too.
very interesting, the way they're pushing it.
Yeah.
That'll be great for robotics because robotics is like, you can't train that on the internet. You need environments for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Let me flip the question around a little bit. You're all working in this world already. What hasn't AWS announced yet that you would like to see us working on that would make your lives easier if we could somehow unlock some agentic magic that you could use?
I would really love to see more about edge computing. I would expect to see all these devices already starting to run AI. So if they need to run AI, they need to see the data there. It's another shift in the way you're serving knowledge, the server serving data. We're already seeing it from customers, but I want to see the infrastructure really supporting it. Right? Yeah. Edge computing has been around, I don't know, people are talking about for 8 years, something like that.
Yeah.
But you don't see a cohesive experience. You want to see this, this twin computing that everyone are talking about,
right?
Really matured. I don't know. Maybe it's going to be tomorrow. So
there's a couple days left.
Exactly.
There, right? You never know.
Yeah.
But I'm expecting to see more and more AI on the edge device.
Yeah,
right.
Mine's very similar to what Guy's saying. I think primarily, especially when I had this whole, the whole IoT greengrass thing that came out, right?
Right.
And I thought there was a lot of promise there, and especially with IoT being a lot of data-heavy time series data. There's so much that actually goes into it, and so crunching all of that, I think agents are great at that, right there, right? And so summarization. There's so much that you can do on device first before you actually push it up to the cloud. Seeing something around that would have been great. I think, we'll see. Yeah, it's good. Maybe.
I think it's interesting what you just said. I think IoT coming before agentic solutions actually really hurt IoT. It would have been all processing the amount of data that can be produced off of machines, off of watches and everything else. It's a difficult task. You to be prescriptive on the analytics of that is not easy. If you could have agents just run through the data like, hey, what are the patterns you found? Ooh, there you go. Look, we found some interesting intelligence, right? It would have been really cool. Maybe we circle back to that too, right? I'll let them know. I'll let leadership know that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. That's a risky question that you asked because it really has so many services that I'm also losing track of them. And maybe what I'm about to say.
You need an agent for that too.
Exactly. I need an agent that tells me whether AWS can do this or not. But I do think there are some optimizations of your AWS environment. If an agent could tell me that, I think AWS is uniquely suited to solve that problem for me. The DevOps optimization in the last mile. I think that is something that I would love to see AWS go deeper into.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, and certainly it is a dangerous question, but I think as AWS, one of the things I've always liked about AWS is everything we build works working backwards from what customers have told us they want us to build. So I'm always eager to hear, like, you tell me we have a gap, tell me something we want to go build, I'll go advocate for it. So it is dangerous because you'll probably send me off on a exotic mission to go tell Andy Jassy that he needs to go build these things. But it's great.
Great.
It's great feedback overall. I heard a little bit before about governance. Alok, a couple of you have already sort of gone in this direction. I think agentic AI deployments, the many agents that we have to deal with and the scale and the scope of what we're talking about, it gets complicated, right? This isn't a simple problem. So how do you surface out all that tenant information, the businesses that you're operating, and still adhere to all of the compliance and governance best practices that are out there? And again, we've already mentioned enterprise customers. Enterprise customers, this is the first question they ask of any SaaS product that comes in, any agentic SaaS product. If it isn't now, it's going to be the topic on the tip of their tongue soon. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I would actually say, I think largely this is actually one of the inspirations for why we started Omnistrate, right? Which is we needed a framework, if you will, for what deployments mean. And so when we talk about deployments, especially to adhere to compliances or even, as I said, enterprise-ready deployments. And so that applies a lot even in the agentic world, especially, as I said, because it's still compute, it's still a process, it's still code that's running somewhere that needs to be secure, it still needs to be verifiable, it still needs to be auditable, all of that, right? And so where we've started seeing success is because we start out with a framework that essentially gives you on day one that this is the bare minimum that you need to actually hit, or these are the pieces that are missing that you plug in, but then the rest of the orchestration we take care of. There is at least a starting point for you right there, right? Yeah. And that helps from an enterprise deployment perspective, I would say.
Yeah, and I think it's a great answer because honestly, if you're selling to enterprise customers and you don't have these controls in place, they're not going to buy. But if you were one of those startups we were talking about, you're not going to have those enterprise controls in place. It's not a day one activity you're going to work on. But when that first enterprise customer knocks on the door and comes and says, "We love your product, and like, tell us about all your compliance stories," and you're like, "I've heard of SOC 2."
Exactly. We're already seeing that, by the way. So me and Alok were having lunch today. So I was telling him this is already happening. As you said, every enterprise is buying AI right now. There is a mandate from the board to show efficiency, productivity, probably labor gains with AI right now as a boardroom mandate. So they are all either looking to build or buy, right? So that's the two options that they have. Building AI, like agentic multi-agent orchestration AI, is extremely hard. They're getting to 90% is maybe faster. You can just like do RAG, stitch everything together, it's faster. But every 9 after that is incredibly hard. It's the same amount of effort that you have to put in. So that's why they're looking at startups. So as you said rightly, Bill, we are getting pulled into the enterprise. And that's why it's revolutionary. This doesn't happen so often where we just launched GA in September and we are already enterprise only right now.
Yeah.
So every enterprise is effectively opening up their doors. They're like, we need to like show efficiency right now, right?
Yeah.
So yes, from a governance perspective, they are all looking at, hey, now this can you run inside of VPC on a data center as well? Like we are in the number one financial institution in the world, and they are like, we are on-prem only. And we're like, what on-prem? Like, like what on-prem I thought was 20 years back. So that's already happening, and we can very clearly see it's very relevant to the theme that we're talking about. So I think because since for AI, data is like pretty important, I'd also touch on another topic, which is lineage, right? So not just governance. Yeah. They're like, hey, where did this come from? Did it come from an agent? Did it hallucinate? Or is it actually grounded in the data that I have?
Exactly.
So we have to show the lineage of where the data came from. Because as I told before, like we are actually orchestrating across multiple different data systems. It could be CRM, it could be an email, it could be a phone call, it could be a call transcript, it could be this podcast, it could be anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, this is what Bill said in this podcast. So it's probably good that you go ask Bill to build something on AWS, right? So things like that. So that's the lineage part, which we're very important because let's say we're selling to a financial institution, you don't want the banker to, on the other side, to say something that is actually not grounded in the data that they have. So that is another topic that everybody is coming to us for. Like show the lineage of where the data came from and ensure that it doesn't hallucinate.
Nice.
Yeah, I would say there's even You were saying startup doesn't need compliance. They do these days.
They do, right?
They do.
Yeah.
And I think that what strikes me that now with all this agentic application, chatbot, chat history, then everything is becoming multi-tenancy in a sense, because it's becoming multi-tenancy by the end users. The end users are now generating data. They're generating chat history. They're generating agentic memory. You need to start thinking about multi-tenant from day one, because you accumulate all this data. These are not just one-time chatbots. You're starting to generate history. You're starting to learn about your users. They are generating data. In our case, they're even generating knowledge graphs practically on the fly, based on their memory, based on their chat history, based on their agentic memory. And you need to make sure that it's all secured and private, because these are private users' questions and answers and private information. So you need to make sure that this is being handled from day one. Practically in our case, it means multi-graph from day one. You need to have these multi-graph, and they're going very fast, like very, very fast, because if these startups are successful, then get users, each user is generating more data. So, and no one wants to be found as a privacy, to have a privacy breach, right? Privacy breach can kill your company.
Right.
So, so that's another major shift that we see, that the user, the end user, that are kind of generating a lot of data. And this data is being used by the application to serve the user better, to have a more personalized experience. And that's another major shift in the way building agentic application, chatbots, whatever you are building, right? And because these chatbots are gonna replace all the service people, right? You want them to give you the same service. You don't want to explain from each time who you are, what you do, why do you want the service. They need to know you. You don't want an agent with amnesia. You want an agent that really remember you, that really giving you the same experience that you used to get from a human.
Yeah.
And that is a big shift.
I like it.
Yeah, I think one thing that we haven't quite touched on yet, which is something that I've started to see with more enterprises and even some of the governments that we work with, is the agent and the model is a black box. And that's a bit scary, because when you're putting data inside this black box, people want to know what's happening with that data. Like you mentioned, they want to know the lineage of what's happening inside the black box. And I think today the models don't quite give you that. They don't quite help you understand what's happening behind the scenes. And that is a no-go, especially for the governments. So what is the harness that you have to build around so that, and the anonymization layer that needs to exist so that you can make it ready to feed inside
Say the word.
unique piece of technology?
Say the word. You need explainability. Say it. That's what you need, right? You want explainability. You want to understand what's going on, right?
Yep.
The explainability, yes,
Exactly,
that's right.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Without putting it inside the black box. You don't want to.
But you still want explainability. You still want to understand what's
You
going
still
on.
want this
You
new
don't want to guess
technology.
why that was the result, right?
Yes.
So what was that?
You don't want to guess why that was
Yeah,
the result. You want
that's
to
right.
have explainability. You want to understand the whole process, despite the fact this is a black box, right?
Exactly. These are all things that used to exist before LLMs were around, and we had these compliance certifications to address them. But now with this new technology, we don't quite have this piece yet.
Yeah. I like it. That's a pretty cool way. You ejected governments into that. And I'm almost tempted to say hey, let's go in that direction. But I feel like we might go down a rabbit hole if we start talking about how governments are using Agentic AI right now. But it's an interesting process you're talking about. Now, when we think in terms of change management, right, and I think the lineage is a piece of that.
Yep.
But is there more to it than that?
100%.
Yeah. So go a little bit in that direction. What else should be people thinking about? Governance, lineage. What else is in that
100%.
box?
100%. I think this is a great question, by the way. So this is where I think DIY agent builders and you build your own agents, kind of those things fail. I would, in our space, they don't work. It's very clear to us. I would kind of agree with what Mihir was saying, that hey, people are used to kind of point and click SaaS workflows. They don't understand that these agents don't say the same thing every time, right? So they say different things, say it different ways. So it's behavior management. There's a behavior change on how you have to use it.
Yeah.
The coding agents, engineers are tinkerers, so they took it very easily. But if we go into other verticals, it's going to be hard to actually change manage, because we deal with very old financials and energy enterprises, and there's like a 50-year-old salesperson. He's like, hey, what is this? I just want this, and it's not doing what I'm asking it to do.
Yeah.
So that's where change management comes in. I think that is where the world of forward deployed engineering, Mihir, your previous job is like now. That's the pathway to get to the end user. So the way we do it is, yes. So I think you have to still prove that you can actually deliver value to the customer. So you come in and you prove value very quickly, but then you have to train the workflow, so the workforce, and then you have to train the trainers, because you cannot just do it once and go away, because you have to train the trainers and they have to like keep it going. The third thing, where we have found incredible success in sales, there's a power law where the 10% of the people bring in the 90% of revenue and the remaining just follow. So you have to take these workflows that are working for the 10% of the people and scale it across the organization, right? So that becomes incredibly specific to every organization out there. And you need somebody who can sit with the bestseller out there and try to replicate that workflow across the organization. That's the change management. That's where we see a lot of success. And then you kind of prove to the management and kind of have a global rollout. This is where if you look at the MIT study, like 95% of the agents fail because you don't get any business outcomes. You can't just throw an agent on the other side and expect adoption, right? You have to have like hand-to-hand combat and effectively go one step at a time to scale it across the organization.
If I ever want to do a study, I want to do it through who publicized that MIT study. I have yet to meet anyone who doesn't know about this study. It's probably the most popular piece of agentic AI research out there, right? Everybody seems to know it. But anyone else on change management? Look, I bet you have an opinion on this, right?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, again, it still stays the same in the sense that, you still need the whole accountability on what actually triggered the change and essentially the whole flow, right? And so that still applies irrespective of whether it's agents or it's traditional software from our perspective. So there should be controls that you have in place that, if a customer screaming at that point and saying, what did you do, right? You need a way to essentially undo that or roll it back. And you need to do it safely. So all of those are essentially going back to the framework that I was talking about. So control plane is aware of these things. It's watching these things and essentially giving you controls and ways in which you can tackle all of those problems. And so, I would say it fundamentally stays the same from our perspective. It's just enabling safe deployments, enabling ways in which you can actually do this in a scalable way, irrespective of how many different variations you have for these deployments, and being able to audit it back to when that change was performed and who did it and what version. All of that still stays the same from our perspective.
Right on. 2 minutes left. All right.
Sure.
Quick lightning round. One or two word answers here. What's the most exciting thing we're going to learn about in the next year in the world of agentic AI? Alok, go ahead.
I guess obviously I want to say AGI, but no, I'll stay away from that. I think reliability.
Reliability.
Anything that helps with that.
Oh, I hope we have a couple announcements around that here.
We just reliability is our mission at scale, by the way. So you took
great.
mine.
All right, Guy, come on. We'll come back to you.
We'll come back to you. Okay. So I mentioned it before, agentic memory, but I think you need to look at it as a different perspective. Like people were always working on, in the last couple of years, working on LLM, right?
Yeah.
How do you understand language? How do you understand what the meaning or what people want to achieve? But they didn't talk about how do you store the memories.
All right.
Like look about your brain, right? It's not homogeneous. You have different roles.
All right, they're going to cut me off here real quick.
Sure.
Transform or die.
Transform or die, Mihir.
Robots.
Robots. All right. With that, those are great. I'm really looking forward to all those things happening in the next year. It's not ambitious at all. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for our guests. This was a really amazing panel. I really enjoyed it. Had a great time. Hopefully we get to do this again next year. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to working with all you guys at some point in this year. All right. Thank you to all of our listeners. Thank you for attending. And thanks again to Myers Media for helping to arrange this. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Welcome back to our second panel here at the SaaS Summit at reInvent. We're here at the Sirius XM Studios. Thanks again to Myers Media for having us here and helping to coordinate all of this for us. This is going to be a great topic. We've got another really interesting panel. We're going to be talking about commercializing open source, the paths, the trade-offs, and the lessons that people have learned. And we're lucky enough to have some really experienced open source founders and operators who built solutions, launched solutions, and managed solutions. Now, I've always personally been really interested in open source. I think it's an interesting pathway to try to not just develop software, but to grow a community of software before you even launch it. So I think we have a lot of interesting perspectives here. We're going to talk a little bit about what it means to be open source, what it means to have that community connection, and what it means to commercialize this open source product. How do you go to a commercialized, monetized product without losing that open source identity that you work so hard to develop? So let's go around the room. We've got a great panel. Kick us off, and let's just go around. Tell me a little bit about yourself, the company you work for, and your background in terms of maybe even why you got into open source.
Oh, awesome. So hi, everyone. My name is Talina, and I work at Couchbase. It's a NoSQL database company, and I'm the engineering manager for the cloud product that we have called Capella. And I joined Couchbase 5 years ago, what brought me here was just the tech and what we provide as a database first, an open source company. And I'm very excited to provide my engineering perspective today.
Spectacular. Thank you. The first of our Peters.
Hi everyone, my name is Peter Farkas and I'm the CEO of Percona. Percona is an open source database services company. So we provide services for MongoDB, Postgres, MySQL, and also Valkey. We have our own distributions. We have some very nice tooling, which you can use to manage your databases. Before Percona, I founded FalkorDB. That's an open source alternative to MongoDB. I worked at Cloudera as well, and I was an early employee of Percona for the first term I had at Percona. So I have about 20 plus years in open source databases, and I'm really glad to be here.
Spectacular. All right. Next, Peter.
Another Peter. So, Peter Zaitsev, I started my career at MySQL AB when it was nice Swedish company, not being kind of part of Oracle. And then I started Percona now about 20 years ago. Peter Farkas described what Percona does. I think what I want to highlight is what is unique about Percona. And it is what we have chosen to really lean in open source. And really, the only software we ship to our customers is open source. We don't do any proprietary software, right, or eventual open source licenses or anything like that, right? And I think that puts us sort of on the opposite path where many other companies say, hey, we want to do some, fantastic engineering, and then we find ourselves in a situation where maybe to get, more funding, we have to go, proprietary or cloud-only path. We took it opposite. How far we can push the open source while being profitable, right? While bootstrapping the company, right? So that is a different path.
All right, great. And Kamal, thank you for having us and sponsoring this. This is amazing. So Kamal, tell us a little bit about yourself, Omnistrate, and how you got into the open source world as well.
Yeah, I'm Kamal Gupta, co-founder and CEO of Omnistrate. What we do is we help software vendors deploy and operate their software stack anywhere across cloud accounts, AWS regions, or customer controlled environments. Thus, in simpler words, you can think of this way: when software vendors are looking to deploy their software stack across the different enterprises and growth companies, every deployment looks slightly different. And it often becomes a mess. And so what we do is we help you build your control plane. That's the name of the technology that you can essentially build and deploy in your account. And that control plane running in your account then manages your customers, subscriptions, deployment, infrastructure, billing, operations, and streamline that. So you don't have to focus on that first 30-40% of undifferentiated tasks and focus on your core application and feature set, what makes you undifferentiated.
Nice. Awesome. All right, last but not least, please fire away.
Yeah, hi, this is Gopi. I work for Couchbase. I'm the CTO of Couchbase. I've been with Couchbase close to 4 years now. And prior to Couchbase, I was at AWS. Kamal used to work with Kamal there. Couchbase is a NoSQL company, like Talina said. We are an open core in the sense that 80% of our software is open to anybody's stuff. They can see the code. We also have a 20% proprietary stuff. Couchbase has been around for a long, long time. It's been like, close to 10 years. We are a public company now. Recently, we went private. So we do everything that a NoSQL company provides. Like, we are specialized in NoSQL comes in various flavors. We specialized in document managed storage, like Mongo does, like, in terms of like, a good comparison. And we take a document database to a next level in terms of like, we are a NoSQL company, but very SQL in our approach to a NoSQL company, in the sense that we have a SQL interface, we have SQL constructs, we have optimizer, everything. I come from a database world. I've been doing databases for the past 30 years. So many people, my colleagues included, have been in the database world. So we know SQL as SQL, but we want to do like, a SQL flavor for a NoSQL company, in terms of that's probably the most well understood interfaces for anybody who wants to deal with data. But we take the complexity of, like, we are a big proponent of, like, of document-based storage as the next frontier of database applications, and we are able to do that as part of our offering for the past few years.
Great. All right. Now we've already heard a little bit of this flavor, but I think anyone who's listening, who's thinking about an open source product or has a product and they're thinking, geez, should I go down the open source path, is probably really interested in the founder story here. Like, how did we get started? What was it that said, hey, I've got an idea. I've got Percona, I've got Couchbase. Should I just build this thing and go out and try to sell it? Or should I, work from open source backwards and try to create that community? What's that thought process? And if you were going to do it again, like if you were going to go down the road again, would you take the same path? Or would you recommend to anyone else out there who said, hey, I've got a cool code idea and I built it. Should I just throw it out on GitHub and say it's open source, or should I go and make it completely proprietary and sell it? Peter, let me fire that at you first and see what you want to say on that.
Sure. So if you look at Percona, our path started from a different angle altogether. We started from the services, right? We said, hey, how do we help our customers to run MySQL in the best way possible? We started with services, but then we figure out, well, the services is not enough. We had to modify the source code, we had to build tools, and that was a very natural path for us, right? Because we're a part of an open source ecosystem. The other reason for me personally was what I really used the open source in my kind of previous life in sort of like a web startup, right? And I wanted to give back, right? Right, so that is another reason. Now, what I would say though, right, I think a lot of problems now in open source, and maybe some of those open source drama, somebody changed the license, right? And, how we can do that, they happen because people may go in the open source for their wrong reasons, and maybe open source too much.
Yeah.
Right. I think that is something what you need to think about, right? Because I see about the open source essentially as if you sort of give to society, give to the universe, right? You give this gift, and you know what? You're not expecting to get something back. People may contribute, but we don't have to. For example, number of open source companies would say, hey, we did all the work, released it as an open source, and now Amazon abused it. How do they abuse it? They are doing totally what is extended. They are building their commercial services on the open source software, you made decision to release that as open source. You could choose not to do it, right? And then now you're complaining because maybe you did not understand what open source means, right? And that is what I would encourage, right? I would also say if you're thinking about that not fully open source, let's say open core or some other route, right? It's always much easier and less drama to give more to ecosystem, give more to community, open source more bits and pieces, right? Than the opposite.
Well, one of the things you said there was really interesting to me, that you're interested in the open source community in part because you were part of the open source community already. You were already consuming open source products. And we've got a couple people from the engineering side here on Couch. Do you find yourself gravitating more toward open source products being in the open source community already?
That's a good question. As an engineer myself, or as a developer or an engineering manager, one of the things that I take, if I have to decide if I have to use a product, one of the things that I would look at is what are the core functionalities that this product gives us? What are the trade-offs that I have to make? And if a developer has to make that decision, it does help if the code is open source, because I can go and read it. I can understand the architecture better,
right?
And that helps me build trust to use that product.
Does the product, the open source product, having a open core version or commercial version influence your thought process on consuming it?
I feel like open core it's a natural evolution to open source.
Yes. Yeah.
Because with open source, you're trying to validate your product. You're trying to find if it fits and if you have a market for it. So if you're trying to build a community, that's when you would want to build an open source product. The moment you have a community and they have been using your product for a while, they face different kinds of challenges.
Right.
And that helps you make a decision on what aspects of your product should be commercialized and what should remain open core.
Right.
So if I'm actually evaluating a product that is open core, I know that they have had a community for a long time and they've been using the product and they have seen successes. So I would definitely want to use an open core product. And it's a good sign.
Yeah, I feel like when we're talking about commercialization, and it's just, the topic we're talking about today, I feel like thinking about where that open core fits in with the community is a really important point. I have definitely seen in my own experience some communities, they get a little rattled when somebody steps up and says, "Hey, we're gonna own this. We're gonna manage this product. We're gonna create a commercial version of it. We're gonna potentially have 20% of the code that we're gonna put behind the paywall here." And it can rattle a community that wasn't expecting it. They thought everything was going to be open source forever. Now, you went through that transition. So Gopi, were you with Couchbase when that happened, or?
No, I wasn't with Couchbase when that happened.
Okay.
This was so Couchbase history it was an open source project. It was it started off from memcached.
Yeah.
It was a cache. Then we evolved ourselves into a database. So that's the transition, from a cache to a database. When we did databases, even then it was, so the way we are looking at databases is that most of what a customer needs is open source, like a pure database standpoint. But when we are getting into a point where enterprises needs, cross-region replications, those kind of things, is not everybody needs that, to build and validate, as Talina said, a use case. Those are all specialized features that an enterprises might need. Yeah. And when you get into that sphere of your servicing an enterprise, there's going to be a cost associated with that thing. And that's where we wanted to make sure that things are there. So this is why the 20%, and that's fine line. We're not putting a paywall on a very, very important feature for the community to even validate their use case. We had a paywall. So we want to make sure that anybody can use Couchbase, anybody can validate their use case. Only when you cross that boundary of enterprise level validation, or you need something else, then you trip over into that. You need to pay for that aspect of it.
Yeah. Kamal, let me pull you into the conversation here, because I think that's a really interesting point. When we're thinking about open core, and we're thinking about, hey, we want to have a commercial, but we're mostly talking about enterprise customers, I think. I mean, I don't know if that's going to be true for you guys too, but Kamal, in your experience, is the open core really, how do we present the product with enterprise features in addition to the open source version?
I'm just thinking about your question. Maybe you can rephrase.
Yeah. Let me take another stab at that. So what we're hearing is one of the reasons to actually go to an open core product is to build the features that enterprise customers need, but not maybe everybody needs them, right? In your experience, now, I think there's an interesting tie-in here with Omnistrate, right? About how you can actually manage the delivery for those enterprise customers. Do you sort of see that same vision in terms of where the open core product comes in and where the commercialization journey starts, being, hey, enterprise customers are now coming and asking us for more features. Is that really where this kicks off and the commercialization story starts? Or is it even earlier for you?
I think depends upon really the strategy the organization is taking. And I think the room, for example, Peter and Peter, they talked about one strategy where you can have a open source product and sell services and build solutions around it. Then there are other strategies, like I would argue that Couchbase have 3 strategies, for example. One is not open core, doing open core where they have this enterprise features on top is one part. But then being able to say, okay, how enterprises are going to deploy it. They can use the licensing model. They can build the managed services on top of it. They can use AWS marketplaces to sell on marketplaces. So those are the distribution that I got enabled. So that's one part of the question. To answer, coming back to the core of the question, so in the former case, as you can see, you do not need that differentiation. You can simply sell tools and services around it. I mean, FalkorDB is also another example of it. They build the managed service without requiring, the specialized features or enterprise features. So you can totally build a solution and feature set around it. I can see, though broadly speaking, why it's more tempting to do the latter, which is to build. And I hear the point that Gopi is making, which is, look, at some point, there's one aspect about being developers coming in, contributing to it, using the product, getting advantage to it. But when you get to certain scale and certain enterprise, right, I can see also that, look, those are very specialized features that you have as use case that you need it for meeting your compliance requirements, or getting to the disaster recovery for business continuity, or you need to have scale which is amazingly massive. And at some point I can see that also is a valid, absolutely great business model to basically say, look, we helping the community, come join us, but you want to go and build scalers, let's partner and let us help you in helping you achieve that. But at some point that becomes a paywall, as Gopi mentioned.
Makes a lot of sense. Peter, we haven't got you into the conversation enough yet. I want to pull you in. So I've just built an amazing code base. I'm going through this thought process right now, and you're going to be my mentor. How would you help me to make this evaluation in terms of the path that I should go down, at least out of the gate? Like, what should I be thinking about? What are the decision points that I'd be having to make it, and when should I make them? Do you have any thoughts in terms of me and my business and my future $1 billion business that I'm going to have? Or
so is this related to open core or open source? That's a very different thought process.
I actually, guide me in either direction. Like, tell me where would you start today? So we've got this cool product. I have a motivation to become rich. So I think that might inform the question, but I'm also open-minded. I'm open to any path you take me down. What would be the rationale for what I would choose? But maybe are there specific factors about the software or the market or anything else I should be thinking about that might drive it in one direction or another?
Well, I would say that first and foremost, open source is not a business model. So lots of developers would start out with saying, okay, we would like to build an open source product, and that is going to be our business model. And that is actually not something that would lead to good business outcomes. Open source leads to, by itself, open source leads to good adoption, for example, because you're going to work with people from outside of your organization. If you do everything right, they would contribute to your code, and together you can build something much better. You will have a lot different approaches to solving problems, and that's going to lead to I believe a better product. But that's not a business. That's not going to, as you said, make you rich. That's not a good recipe. You can leverage the better adoption of open source to figure out how your business is going to commercialize your product, but by itself, it's not going to be a solution. When it comes to open core, I have respect for those who are clear about their intentions, who are clear about their desire to monetize some of the enterprise features of their product. But especially with database products, I would argue that I'm not sure if, as a user, I'm not sure if I would be confident that the same care is going to go towards the open source or the community edition of the product compared to the paid features, which are eventually going to drive the business itself. So if I'm a user and I would like to stay on the open source distribution, I would have the question whether they will still care about me if they are going to become successful. A good example would be MongoDB, and arguably they got rich, but the essence of the strategy was to use open source as a marketing strategy, and then later on pull the rug from under their community and change the license. Whereas with open core, I think the monetization is definitely going to become easier on the short run, but the adoption would also most likely be a bit more bumpy, because there would be no trust towards the hardcore open source users. So back to your question, if I would start today, I would start with open source, and I would have a very clear idea on how the business model is going to look like, whether I would be a services company, whether I would have some other monetization strategy, like tools around the open source project. But all in all, I would start with open source, and I would monetize a smaller slice of the bigger pie.
Okay, I like that. Peter, you look like you also.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight something, because I think we are talking like as if there are two choices, like an open source and open core, right? And I think there is interesting what if you look at the sum of the most successful open source projects, there's something else entirely. Like think about Linux, think about Postgres, think about Kubernetes, right? And in that case, what those are is a software which is owned by some nonprofit foundation, and there are multiple vendors which are building their commercial value, right? But they don't have that downside which exists in a community version of an open core. The vendor decides, oh, you know what? I have those reserved features which I'm not going to implement in community version no matter what. Even if you guys contributors want to contribute that, right, it's not happening. For example, in MySQL, right, with a number of features, we as Percona, we implemented, we would love to contribute that to Oracle, right, to make MySQL Community Edition better, but we can't. Well, so we have our own kind of fork, our own distribution, right, to do that instead.
Okay.
Right, but that is not obviously what happens in Linux, Kubernetes environment, right? And I think when it's looked at that model, it is very interesting, because on one extent it allows the community and ecosystem of vendors to decide, hey, this is what you want to build and have open source, and this is IP we want to keep in-house, and the features we want to build proprietary. So, and I think that is a very cool model really for both parts.
Yeah, the rug pull thing. I've heard that. I've seen it in the community. I've heard that reflected across. I think, and maybe it's fair or maybe it's unfair to the individual companies, but there's been a tremendous amount of blowback in the past year. Several specific companies, I won't throw anyone out on the carpet, but I think we all know where they are. And the community has reacted. They've reacted with forks. They've reacted by abandoning the products and saying we don't want to be part of this community. It feels like the worst of all worlds in a way when that happens to you. I'm not saying that those companies won't continue to be successful. They probably will. They're making plenty of money. But if you're going down this path, and you think at some point you really want to monetize the product, how do you prepare your community? How do you get them in the mindset of like, hey, yes, we're building this for open source. Yes, we're going to have this, but we have a plan here. We're planning. Is there some way you can sort of set the context for companies even before you've built and launched your product and started to build this community? Do you guys have any ideas, any thoughts on how people can approach this?
Yeah, I think someone mentioned here, right? You need to have a very clear. I mean, if you're lucky enough to have a clear strategy to start with, that you're going to be an open core, and there are certain features that are going to be behind a paywall, or we're going to invest in that aspect of it. But as long as you're true to your open source community as well, like many of the features, at least in Couchbase, is built on top of the platform is built on top of the existing open source stuff. So we had to contribute back into the things, and it's very popular because of that reason. Is that every paid feature is built on top of, we consume our own open source, open core aspects of it. So we don't not neglect that and just leave it on the website. We don't have another version of the open source inside it as a enterprise thing. It's just one version of the server that we release. It's all layered. Everything uses the bottom layer anyway. So as long as you're clear in terms of which features are there, but where you lose the trust of your community is when you're going down and you made a commitment to a community to do something, and then you change course because of some business or something or competitive threat that you have to change things. That's when not only are you going to antagonize with your community, but also your own internal users the developers who are building on top, they don't know how to react to this and just position something out in terms of what it is, that what are we in terms of what it is. So sometimes it comes in in a business, it comes in terms of as a pure engineer working on it, you want to have a very clear mind space as to working on the source of projects, and this is something which is very different, which is 20%. And as Peter was saying, if we have a community asking and wanting to commit to it in terms of, hey, please go ahead and make a commit on these aspects of it if you want a version of that thing that you want to contribute to the society. That's a different story than we building and then making sure that we said open source, but since we started using, we're going to ask you to pay for it from here on forward. That's, if you can get that right, I think you can live in a happy place. But when you get that wrong is when things go haywire in terms of people. I know companies which have done 360. They did this, then they did a paywall, then came back again into the open source because they couldn't convince themselves whether they have done the right thing.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Now, continuing down this road. So we're sitting here at reInvent, AWS, obviously. I think there's a strong correlation between success in open source and the cloud. But I think it's pretty diverse. I don't think there's going to be a single answer for the right way to build open source and deliver it on AWS is X. But Kamal, I'm looking at you. So anyone who doesn't know Kamal has worked at AWS as well, has a great background, very diverse. Kamal, if you were talking to an open source company about the cloud, what are some of the problems they're going to run into? What are some of the challenges in terms of partnering with the cloud companies and how they should be thinking about this? And what are some strategies they can actually use to take advantage of the cloud to create a broader community, more customers, different types of customers? How would you counsel them and how would you approach that?
I think one of the first things I often see talking to so many open source founders, that they are just not aware of that world of cloud, and because they feel it's far away, there is some level of it's just fear of unknown. I don't know what that is. I don't know how to use that thing. I don't know how to effectively partner with the cloud. I think that's where that's one part of the conversation that we have sometimes, and actually more often. Then there's other segment where the founders, like for example FalkorDB, he was a ex SVP of Redis, built now the CEO of FalkorDB. He knew about the cloud. He built the cloud before, so he had understanding in and out. Now the question for them becomes, okay, I have an application, I have a solution. How do I now go and effectively partner with AWS? But I don't have the time and energy to spend 2 years building the control plane, building the marketplace listings, getting the FDR approval and getting the co-sell. And there are a bunch of challenges that you have to navigate through. And the guy was very clear that look, I know that I need to do this XYZ. It's not the way I want to spend and the time and money, right? My core focus right now is build differentiated things and grow my vibrant community and build a value for the community as opposed to getting caught up into these things. So there are two different parts of it. I'm not saying the former doesn't run into latter. I think the former, they want to do it. It's just the fear of unknown. And for them, often coming back to the solutioning part, for them, it's often about just a crawl, walk, run approach. Just a bit of an education. I think trying to go too far and just doing, okay, here is the top of the mountain, might scare them, right? Just taking a baby step. Okay, what is your first goal, right? They want, obviously, they also have an obligation to the community and how they want to stay loyal to the community. And so how do you now navigate that through where you're not breaking promise? You are the promises that you have made to the community, you align with them, but you also work your solution, whether you're still offering as a direct, you just take the open source solution, offer a managed service around it, and over time you can maybe think about open core model. But the question really is, okay, that's the first step. And what does that give to them back, right? Maybe just a managed solution is also a huge value, I would argue, on top of open source, because otherwise the customers who are operating and using your application at scale, they have to learn and get expert at. How about simply getting an endpoint which is running in cloud somewhere, and I don't have to worry about it, and it just works. Right. And I don't need an expertise on my side. That's a huge value. And the fact that the original authors and have built a company around it, and the people who have contributed to that, they are part of that company, and they're providing with expert solutioning around it. And that's a great model. Now, over time, you trying to build the differentiated features, you can tell here is another enterprise plan. You can plan to and build on top of it. So it's more of a crawl, walk, run approach. But for the ones who are more experienced founders that we see, they know exactly what needs to be done. It's purely a matter. I think there is a delta, I would say, in terms of AWS do a phenomenal job in laying out the foundational blocks, all the building blocks with more than 300 services and all the infrastructure and all the marketplace plans and programs. But somebody still has to understand that, execute against that, and show to the AWS they are also leaning it. It's not one way door, it's two-way door. So that part, that's where we come in, is to basically work with them, and we build a solution to augment and accelerate that aspect of it.
All right, I just heard my ear that we have 5 minutes. So I want to move one more part of the conversation, only because every talk now has to involve agentic AI somehow. So let's go around the room here real quick. I'd like to hear in terms of how you think about open source and agentic AI, and if they are compatible. Like, is there a world where agentic AI is going into the solutions and the engineering team that you're managing, and we're finding some good synergies between open source and agentic AI, or is it sort of on the edge of where you're looking right now?
Interesting. I think the whole AI narrative needs to tie in with your core product and your core offering.
Yeah, fair.
And if you have a community that's already using your core product, the AI narrative just seamlessly should tie into that.
Okay.
And if we think about it from that angle, it's very easy to decide what stays open source and helps retain that community and solve AI-related problems for the community.
Nice.
Does it make their life easy to focus on writing the agents, and everything else just falls in place as part of your product? That would be one of the drivers, I guess.
I like it. Peter Z. Percona?
Yeah. What I would say is thinking not just about the open source, but the databases, which is my role in particular. Databases is rather complicated operationally, and right now that still includes a lot of time of DBAs and other operators, right? And I think that is where agentic use makes a lot of sense, right? I see we are going more and more towards the self-running databases, right? Where we can help to self-heal, optimize. There's a lot of use cases, and some companies have a little bit here and there, right? You know, like I think Oracle was advertising now for years, right? Autonomous database, but in practice, right, we're not quite there yet, right? But we can, get there, I think.
That makes sense. Yeah, Kamal?
Yeah, I think first of all, I would say just building just because you have a product and AI is booming and building something around it makes no sense. You need to Talina's point, I think you need to really find a value that you're going to add, make something that you're going to make it simpler for your customers. The other thing that just a very different point that we see is how AI is revolutionizing the SaaS itself and how it is impacting the experiences that, we talked about for decades that how SaaS experience was ultimate, right? But now AI is just reimagining that some of the core fundamental, first of all, the software is not a software anymore. It's a smart agent. That has changed. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, guardrails and observability, the way they talk to each other, everything has changed. Okay, that's one. The level of experience when you talk about SaaS, well, no, not good enough. Now you're talking about tenant level experiences, individual experiences. Okay, how do you get to that? And then you're saying that, okay, this is AI. I need to be better integrated with the ecosystem because there are going to be thousands of agents. And so how do you build your solution, provide that? How does that work? Finally, what about governance? These, ultimately, you're going to deploy your solutions to enterprises. And these enterprises are going to come and say, look, I'm not sending my data to thousands of ISVs. Not going to happen.
Right.
So now they're pushing how about flipping the model of completely SaaS, which is hosted SaaS was such a thing for between 2010 to 2020. Now, if you look starting 2022, I would say the industry is moving towards the BYOC.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about deploying in their account.
Yeah.
And enterprises are basically saying, look, that's a well-adopted model.
I like it.
And CISOs are like this, look, if you want to procure software, that is a model because that is validated.
Yeah, I like it. And then those are some great perspectives on how AI could start to inject itself into the open source world through operating and through the way we're deploying our software. But with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you guys so much. You were an amazing panel. This is an awesome topic, and I'd love to continue to talk to you more about open source and how commercialization and how we continue to evolve it. But with that, that's it for this year for the SaaS Summit here at reInvent. Thanks again, Kamal and Omnistrate for sponsoring. Thanks again to Myers Media for doing all of the technical work to make this an amazing experience. Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.